What happens when you look at the deadliest creature in the 41st millennium? I was once Inquisitor Darius Varn, a servant of the God Emperor, until I uncovered ancient records beneath the ruins of Hive Tartarus. The air in those forgotten archives smelled of metal and decay, documents crumbling at my touch. In the deepest vault, sealed with wards not used since before the heresy, I found mentions of a being the Eldar call the gaze that unmakes. The records claimed this entity does not kill those who witness it. It replaces them. My curiosity led me to seek this creature across 7 sectors. Now I stand before you, my face bearing no eyes, only smooth skin, yet I see more than any mortal should. Do you want to know what happens when the veil between realities tears and something ancient stares back through the gap? I remember the weight of stone above me, even now. Across the countless plains I have wandered, I feel it. The crushing presence of an ancient citadel, the whispered warnings of those who turned back, and the certainty in my heart that I would not be among them. I say was, because the man who entered Altarion no longer exists. I wear his face and carry his memories, but what peers out from behind these blind eyes belongs to something far beyond flesh. The descent into Altarion began like many others. I had mapped forgotten places across Faerun for decades. Ruins speak to me, you see. Where others hear silence, I hear whispers. Where they see emptiness, I see stories etched in dust. The pay was good, the danger familiar, and my reputation as a cartographer of the impossible opened doors others found locked. But Altarion was different. The locals called it the God Grave. They said the ancients built it not to worship divinity but to contain it. A temple inverted, they claimed, designed to imprison rather than exalt. I dismissed their warnings as superstition, the kind that clings to any ruin with enough years behind. 3 villages refused to speak of it at all. In the 4th, an old woman with milky eyes grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and said only, "It does not kill what it takes." I should have listened. The outer chambers of Altarion were unremarkable. Crumbling stonework, faded murals depicting celestial bodies and strange geometries. Nothing worth the terror it inspired in the countryside. My torchlight caught glimpses of disturbed dust, signs that others had ventured this far, perhaps within the year. I catalogued everything methodically, making careful notes in my journal, sketching architectural features that might have significance. Standard procedure. 7 days I spent mapping the upper levels. 7 days of growing disappointment. Whatever secrets this place held, they were buried deeper. On the 8th morning, I found the descent. It was hidden behind a false wall. The seams so perfectly fitted that I would have missed them entirely had my torch not guttered at precisely the right moment, casting shadows that revealed the truth. The wall pivoted silently, impossibly smooth after countless centuries. Beyond it lay a spiral stair, descending into darkness so complete it seemed to devour my torchlight. I remember standing at the top of those stairs, feeling a cold breeze rise from below, carrying a scent I could not identify. Not decay, not dampness, something sharper, like the air after lightning strikes, but tinged with something metallic and strange. I should have recognized it as a warning. Instead, I took it as an invitation. The descent took hours. The stairway spiraled tighter as it went deeper, the walls closing in until my shoulders nearly brushed both sides. I counted steps out of habit, 647 before the stairs finally ended at a landing of polished black stone. The floor was inlaid with silver, forming patterns that hurt my eyes when I tried to follow them. They seemed to shift when viewed from different angles, suggesting shapes that could not exist in 3 dimensions. Ahead, a corridor stretched into darkness. The walls were covered in script, tiny characters that flowed like water, not carved but somehow grown into the stone itself. I recognized elements of celestial, abyssal, and primordial, all woven together into something I could almost understand. Almost, fragments resolved themselves as I studied them. Phrases that made my skin crawl. That which sees all outcomes. The mirror that unmakes. Thought given form. The end of certainty. The corridor ended at a perfect circle of darkness. Not a doorway. Nothing so mundane. It was as if someone had cut a hole in reality itself. No light reflected from its surface. No sound echoed back when I called into it. It simply was a negation of everything. A void, waiting. I've spent years trying to remember why I stepped through. Was it curiosity, ambition, or something else? Something that reached from the other side and pulled at threads in my mind I did not know existed. I remember only the certainty that I must continue, that what waited beyond that threshold was what I had sought all my life without knowing. The void parted around me like water, cold and viscous. For one heartbeat, I felt suspended between moments, neither here nor there. Then I was through, standing in a chamber that defied understanding. The room was vast, far larger than the space above could possibly contain. The ceiling arched so high that my torch could not illuminate it. The floor was the same polished black stone, but here it rippled gently, as if I stood on the surface of a lake frozen between breaths, and at the center, raised on a dais of white marble veined with gold, stood a pedestal. Upon it rested a cube of perfect crystal, each face so flawless it was nearly invisible except where light caught its edges. Within the crystal floated an eye. Not human, not elven, nothing belonging to any creature I had encountered in my travels. It was massive, filling most of the cube. Its iris a color I cannot name, shifting between shades that should not exist together. The pupil was not black, but deepest violet, pulsing slightly as if with a heartbeat. I approached slowly, my footsteps silent on the rippling floor. The eye did not move, did not seem to register my presence. I circled the pedestal, studying it from every angle. No markings, no warnings. Only that perfect crystal and the impossible eye within. I knew somehow that this was what the inscription had meant. The thought of a god, given form, not a metaphor but literal truth. What floated before me was a fragment of divine consciousness, severed and contained. For what purpose, I could not guess. I raised my torch higher, trying to see more detail. And as the light fell across the crystal at a new angle, the eye moved. It turned to me. It saw me. In that moment, reality folded. The chamber, the ruin, the world itself peeled away like layers of an onion. I stood naked before that gaze, stripped of all pretense and protection, and I saw myself reflected, not as I was, but as all I could be, had been, might become. I saw myself in 1,000 lives, 1,000,000 decisions, branching outward like the roots of a great tree. In one, I turned away from the eye and lived a quiet life, dying in my sleep surrounded by grandchildren. In another, I became a tyrant, my hands stained with the blood of nations. In others, I was savior, villain, bystander, catalyst. Every possible version of Cale Draven played out before me in perfect detail, simultaneous and equally real, and I understood what the eye truly was. Not just divine thought, but divine perspective. The ability to see all possibilities at once, to know with perfect certainty every outcome of every choice. The thing the gods fear most is not death or defeat, but the paralyzing weight of perfect knowledge. My mind could not contain what the eye showed me. No mortal mind could. I felt myself fragmenting, splitting along the same lines as those countless possible selves. My identity, the very core of what made me who I was, began to dissolve under the pressure of too much truth. I tried to scream, but which version of me would make the sound? I tried to run, but in how many timelines would I succeed? I was everywhere and nowhere, everyone and no one. Then, mercifully, darkness took me. I awoke outside Altarian, lying in the grass under the light of 3 moons. At first, I thought I had dreamed it all. Then I noticed the silence. Birds, insects, the wind in the trees, all absent. The world around me seemed flat, painted rather than alive. I raised my hands to my face and felt smooth skin where my eyes should have been. Not wounds, not empty sockets, just unbroken flesh as if eyes had never existed. Yet I could see, after a fashion, not light and color as before, but something else. Possibilities, probabilities, the world not as it is but as it might be, constantly shifting as choices are made and unmade. I see you now, listening to my words. I see the versions of you that chose not to listen, who walked away, who never encountered this tale at all. I see the you who will be forever changed by what I say next, and the you who will dismiss it as fantasy, all equally real, all equally true. The creature in the vault did not kill me. That would have been a mercy. Instead, it replaced me. What looks out through the smooth skin where my eyes once were is a fragment of that divine perspective, filtered through the broken vessel of what was once Kale Draven. I am not the only one. As I wandered the plains in the years that followed, I found others. A drow priestess who opened a sealed text in the underdark libraries of Menzoberranzan. A tiefling warlock who broke his pact to gain knowledge his patron had forbidden. A human child who innocently picked up a polished stone on a riverbank, all wearing faces smooth as eggs where eyes should be. Might be. We are the replaced, the remade. Prophets without purpose, carrying a truth too vast for words. I tell you this, not as warning, though you should indeed be warned. I tell you because in the infinite web of what might be, there are strands where this knowledge saves rather than destroys, where understanding the nature of divine sight creates a shelter against it. The thought of a god, given form, that is what waits in the vault beneath Altarian. Not power to be seized, but perspective that seizes you. It does not hate, does not hunger, does not desire anything at all. It simply is, and in its being, it unmakes certainty itself. Some nights, when the boundaries between planes grow thin, I can feel it still watching me. Not with malice, but with the perfect, dispassionate observation of something that sees all ends at once. It knows I speak of it. It knows who will heed my words and who will seek it out regardless. It knows, and in its knowing, it waits. If you value yourself as you are, the fixed point of perspective that makes you uniquely you, then heed me. There are some truths the mind was not meant to hold, some sights that transform rather than inform. The deadliest creature in all the worlds is not that which kills the body, but that which dissolves the self. I wander still, caught between what was and what might be. Sometimes I can almost remember what it felt like to be certain, to see one path instead of all. Those moments are precious, brief islands in an endless sea of possibility. I cling to them as a drowning man clings to driftwood, knowing they cannot save me but unwilling to surrender completely. The eye in the crystal waits for those who seek it, patient as only a god's thought can be. Beyond time, beyond change, it will show you everything you could become, and in that revelation, you will cease to be anything at all. This is my testimony, my warning, my truth among infinite truths. Look away while you still can. The creature that sits at the heart of Voltarion has many names across the plains. The seeker at the end of time, the infinite gaze, that which sees all paths. In the dusty tomes of Candlekeep, it is called simply the inevitability. But names matter little when faced with something beyond comprehension. What matters is what happens when it finds you, or when you, foolish as I was, find it. I have met others like me in my wanderings. We recognize each other instantly, though no mortal eye could detect our kinship. We are few, scattered across the plains like seeds of a dandelion caught in a storm wind. Each of us carries a different fragment of the whole, a different facet of that terrible, perfect knowledge. Lystra, once a cleric of Selune, now wanders the night roads between worlds. She sees not just what might be, but what has been. All history laid bare before her, every secret act illuminated. The weight of knowing every betrayal, every hidden crime across all of time has twisted her compassion into something cold and merciless. She judges because she cannot forget. Thorn, a halfling who stumbled upon a reflection of the eye in a mountain pool, sees only endings. Every death, every conclusion, every final breath played out in exquisite detail. He has grown obsessed with finding the one timeline, the one possibility where something truly endures. I do not believe he will ever find it. And then there is Vastarin, who was once an archmage of great renown. His encounter left him seeing not just possibilities, but their consequences, rippling outward through time and space without end. Every choice a stone thrown into still water, the ripples intersecting and creating patterns of causality, too complex for any mortal mind to navigate. He no longer speaks. What words could possibly matter in the face of such endless complexity? We crossed paths in Sigil, the city of doors, drawn there perhaps by some fragment of shared purpose. For 3 days and nights we sat in silence in an abandoned bell tower, our smooth faces turned toward one another. No words passed between us. None were needed. We shared what we had become, the fractured perspectives we now embodied, and in that sharing, I glimpsed something the eye itself had not shown me. Hope, not hope for restoration, for a return to what we had been, that was forever lost to us, but hope that our fragmented perspectives, pieced together like a shattered mirror, might reflect something new, something that could stand against the paralyzing totality of divine sight. On the 4th day, we parted ways, each following the probability streams that called to us most strongly. I have not seen them since, though I know with the strange certainty of my condition that they still wander the plains, carrying their fragments of the whole. My path led me to the outer planes, to places where reality thins and the fundamental forces of existence manifest in their purest forms. I sought understanding, context for what had happened to me. If the eye was truly the thought of a god-given form, then perhaps among the gods themselves I might find answers. In the gardens of Arborea, I spoke with servants of the Seldarine, the elven pantheon. They listened to my tale with growing horror, then banished me from their realm, calling me anathema. In the forges of Mechanus, the Modrons studied me with cold curiosity but offered no insight, only endless calculations of probability I already knew. On the wind-swept battlefields of Acheron, I found only warriors who sought to destroy me, sensing instinctively that I represented something that undermined the very concept of meaningful conflict. It was in the grey wastes of Hades, where all emotion and hope go to die, that I finally found a kind of answer. Not from the gods or their servants. Hades is the plane of ultimate entropy, where souls go not to be punished but to fade, to surrender all that makes them distinct until they become one with the greyness itself. It is a place gods rarely visit, for even divine emotion is subject to the plane's draining influence. Yet in that colourless realm, I found unexpected clarity. I came upon a temple, or what remained of one. Its columns had crumbled to dust, its altars toppled and forgotten. No prayers had been spoken here in millennia, yet something lingered, a presence so faint I would never have detected it before my transformation. It was the echo of divinity, the memory of worship, not a god, but the shape left behind when belief fades. And in that negative space, that divine absence, I understood what the I truly was. Not the thought of a god, but what comes before thought. The moment of pure potential before choice narrows possibility into actuality. The I is what gods fear because it is what they cannot be. To be a god is to choose, to embody specific domains and principles. To be the I is to remain forever in the moment before choice, seeing all paths but walking none. I sat in that ruined temple for a year and a day, letting the greyness of Hades wash over me, feeling it try and fail to drain what I had become. I was already empty, already hollow. What remained could not be taken because it was not truly mine. When I finally rose and left that colourless place, I carried with me a purpose of sorts, not a destiny, for I of all beings knew the folly of believing in fixed paths, but a direction, a current in the endless sea of possibility that I chose to follow. I would find others who had been replaced, remade by encounters with fragments of the I. Together, we might constitute not a whole, not a restoration of what was lost, but something new, a composite perspective, a mosaic of partial truths that might approximate understanding. And so I have wandered, gathering stories, finding replaced ones, and listening to what fragment of infinite sight they carry. Some join me for a time, others flee, unable to bear even the fractured reflection of their condition they see in me. I do not blame them. What we have become is not easy to face, even for those who live it. You ask what happens when you look upon the deadliest creature in the multiverse. You become a fragment of it, not dead, but no longer fully alive, not gone, but no longer entirely present, caught between is and might be, between one and many. The warning signs are there for those with wisdom to heed them. When you find writing that changes as you read it, turn back. When you discover spaces larger inside than out, seal them away. When you feel the weight of infinite possibility pressing against the thin membrane of reality, strengthen your sense of self or be prepared to lose it entirely. The creature does not hunt. It does not need to. Curiosity, ambition, the human need to know what lies beyond the next horizon. These bring victims to it willingly, as they brought me. It simply waits, patient as only something outside time can be, for those who will inevitably find it. I have learned to live within the fragmented perspective I now embody. I focus on one possibility stream at a time, tracing it forward and back like a thread in an infinite tapestry. I can almost pretend, in those moments, that I am still the man who entered Altarian all those years ago. Almost, but never completely. The hardest part is not the knowing, but the doubt. When you see all possibilities at once, certainty becomes impossible. Every choice branches infinitely. Every path contains its opposite. There is no right action when all actions lead somewhere both wonderful and terrible. Yet, I continue. I speak my warning to those who will listen. I gather the replaced and share what comfort our fractured communion can provide. And sometimes, in the quiet moments between possibilities, I remember what it was to be simply Cale Draven, explorer and cartographer, a man who believed his choices were his own and his path singular. There is beauty in limitation, in the narrowness of a single perspective. Treasure it while you can. Guard it jealously against the infinite gaze that would dissolve it into endless possibility. For beyond that dissolution, there is no certainty of return. The creature waits still in the vault beneath Altarion. The eye floats in its crystal prison, seeing all, changing those who see it in return. It is patient. It is eternal. It is perspective without purpose, knowledge without understanding, sight without comprehension. It is the deadliest creature because it makes you question what you even means. And once that question takes root, there is no answer that can satisfy. Only endless possibility, stretching in all directions at once. A maze with no center and no exit, where every path is simultaneously taken and abandoned. This is my warning, my testimony, my truth among infinite truths. Look away while you still can. I have learned, in my wanderings, that the eye beneath Altarion is not unique. It is the largest, perhaps the most potent, but not alone. Across the plains, in places where reality grows thin or where divine power has left its mark, smaller fragments can be found. Reflections of the original, echoes of that perfect, terrible perspective. Some are naturally occurring, places where the boundaries between possible and actual have worn away. A pool, high in the spine of the world mountains, that shows not your reflection, but all the selves you might have been. A cavern deep in the underdark where stalactites form patterns that shift with your heartbeat. Each configuration revealing a different fate. A crossroads in the Feywild where travelers sometimes meet versions of themselves from paths not taken. Others are deliberate creations, made by those foolish enough to believe they could harness divine perspective for their own ends. Wizards crafting scrying pools that show not just distant places but possible ones. Clerics creating relics that reveal the consequences of moral choices before they are made. Warlocks binding fragments of foresight into flesh and bone, hoping to see beyond the limits of mortal understanding. All pale shadows of the true eye, yet dangerous in their own right, each capable of replacing those who look too deeply, too long, each leaving behind something that wears a familiar face, but sees with unfamiliar perspective. The inevitables know of these fragments, these echoes. The cosmic constructs tasked with maintaining order across the planes recognize the threat they pose not just to individual minds, but to causality itself. Where they find such fragments, they destroy them when possible, contain them when necessary. But they are few, and the multiverse is vast. Many fragments go undetected, waiting for unfortunate travelers to stumble upon them. I avoid the inevitables when I can. They see in me a corruption of natural law, a being that exists simultaneously in multiple probability streams. They would unmake me if they could, erase the paradox I represent. Perhaps they would be right to do so. Yet I cling to existence, to the fragments of self that remain, not out of fear of ending, but because my warning must be heard. In the markets of Sigil, I once met a collector of curiosities who claimed to possess a sliver of the original eye, no larger than a teardrop. He kept it in a box of lead and silver, sealed with spells of containment. For a price, he would open the box a fraction, allowing the faintest glimpse of what lay within. Just enough, he said, to expand the mind without breaking it. I watched him conduct his business from across the bazaar, saw the faces of those who peered into his box. I saw the subtle change come over them, the momentary disorientation as possibility bloomed behind their eyes. Not enough to replace them, not fully, but enough to plant a seed that would grow with time. That night, I visited his workshop. I did not kill him, though perhaps it would have been a kindness. Instead, I showed him what he truly dealt in, turned my smooth face toward his, and let him see through my sight for just a moment. He fell to his knees, weeping, understanding at last the true nature of his wares. By morning, his booth stood empty. The box was gone, and with it the fragment it contained. Perhaps he destroyed it. Perhaps he sealed it away somewhere even his own greed could not reach. Or perhaps he looked into it one final time, seeking to understand its power fully, and in that moment was replaced entirely. I do not know, and that uncertainty is a comfort. There are still things hidden from my fractured sight, still outcomes that remain unknown until they manifest. In those blind spots, those moments of genuine surprise, I feel most like my former self. The gods fear the eye, because it represents what they sacrificed to become divine, to embody a domain, to become the god of war or love or knowledge, requires choosing one aspect of existence and elevating it above all others. Gods are beings of ultimate specialization, of perfect certainty within their sphere. The eye, with its all-encompassing perspective, its vision of every possibility, undermines that certainty. It reminds them of the infinity they surrendered to become finite embodiments of specific principles. That is why the eye was sealed away, why fragments of it are hunted across the plains, not because of the danger to mortal minds, though that is real enough, but because of the threat to divine purpose. A God who glimpses all possibilities at once loses the conviction that makes divinity possible. I have stood in the presence of gods since my transformation. I have seen them turn away from my gaze, uncomfortable with what I represent. Not fear, precisely, but recognition of something they chose to abandon. The infinite branching of possibility, the freedom of perfect potential, sacrificed for the power of divine certainty. Only Savras, god of divination and fate, has ever looked upon me without turning away. In his eyes, I saw recognition and a deep sadness. "You carry a burden even I would not bear," he told me, his voice like the rustling of pages in an infinite book. "To see all paths at once is to walk none of them truly." He offered me release, a severance from the fragment of the eye that had replaced part of my being, a return to singular perspective, to the limitations of mortal sight. For a moment, I was tempted to be simply Cale Draven again, to see the world through one pair of eyes rather than infinite potentiality, but I refused. Not out of pride or fear, but because the warning I carry would die with my transformation. The truth I speak would become mere story, easily dismissed. My suffering serves a purpose, however small it might be in the vastness of the multiverse. I am beacon and warning both, proof of what waits in the darkness beneath ruined Altarian. Savras did not press me. He understood choice better than most deities, respected my decision even as he mourned it. Before he departed, he gifted me a pendant of polished silver, perfectly circular with a single rune etched into its surface. A divine anchor, he called it. Something to hold me to a single timeline when the weight of infinite possibility grew too great to bear. I wear it still, close against my heart. On the darkest nights, when the boundaries between what is and what might be grow thin, I clutch it like a lifeline. It does not restore what I have lost, but it reminds me that even in a multiverse of endless possibility, individual choice still matters, still shapes the flow of causality in ways both small and profound. That is the paradox at the heart of my condition. I see too much to believe in destiny, yet I witness the power of choice to create something like meaning amid infinite chaos. I cannot unsee what the eye has shown me, cannot return to the comfort of a single path stretching before me, yet I choose, again and again, to carry my warning forward, to speak truth to those who might heed it, to gather the replaced and offer what comfort our fractured communion can provide. In that choosing, that deliberate narrowing of infinite possibility to a single action, I find something like purpose, not enough to make me whole again, but enough to keep me moving forward through the endlessly branching paths of might be. The creature waits still in the vault beneath Altarion, patient as only something outside time can be, hungry not for flesh or soul, but for the singular certainty that defines mortal existence. It does not hate, does not love, does not desire anything a mind like yours could comprehend. It simply is, and in its being, it unmakes. Look away while you still can. Hold tight to your singular perspective, your limited but precious certainty. In a multiverse of endless possibility, the greatest gift is not seeing all paths, but choosing one and making it your own. That is what the eye takes. That is what it replaces. That is why it is the deadliest creature in all the worlds. Not because it kills, but because it dissolves the very thing that makes killing meaningful. The fixed point of self around which all experience revolves. The illusion, precious beyond measure, that you are one thing and not an infinity of potential things. Guard that illusion. Treasure it. It is what makes you real. My journey did not end with that warning, that plea to guard the singular self. I continued my wanderings across the plains, driven by currents in the probability stream I could see but never fully control. I found more of the replaced, more fragments of the eye's perspective, embodied in beings who had once been people. Some joined me for a time, others fled, unable to bear even the fractured reflection of their condition they saw in me. In the city of brass on the elemental plane of fire, I met a Genasi who had been replaced after discovering a shard of the eye embedded in the heart of a volcano. Her smooth face was traced with lines of molten gold that shifted and flowed like lava, marking the probability streams she followed most closely. She saw not all possibilities but all passions, every potential emotion any being might feel in any circumstance. The weight of that knowledge had nearly destroyed her until she learned to channel it into art, creating sculptures of brass and gold that somehow captured the essence of conflicting emotions existing simultaneously. In the endless forests of Arborea, I found a wood elf ranger who had been tracking a wounded stag when it led him to a pool reflecting starlight that should not have been visible through the canopy. He looked into those impossible stars and was replaced by a fragment that showed him all possible growth, all potential flourishing and decay. He now tended a garden where plants from across the multiverse grew together in impossible harmony, each following a different probability stream, existing in different seasons and climates simultaneously within the same space. On the shores of the astral sea, where thought becomes substance and memory takes physical form, I encountered a human child no more than 10 years old, though the replacing had happened decades ago by her reckoning. She had been the victim of a wizard's experiment, deliberately exposed to a fragment of the eye to see if a developing mind might integrate its perspective more successfully than an adult's. The wizard had been wrong. The child saw all possible connections, all relationships that might form or break between any beings across the multiverse. She spent her days creating and destroying intricate string figures that mapped these relationships, visible only to those who, like her, had been replaced. From each of them, I learned more about the nature of the eye and its fragments. Each replaced one carried a different facet of that perfect, terrible perspective. Together, we began to form a more complete understanding, though still fractured and incomplete. The eye could never be fully comprehended by minds that had once been mortal. its totality would destroy us utterly. But in our partial, fragmented sight, we found a kind of communion. We gathered occasionally in places where reality grew thin, where the boundaries between possible and actual blurred naturally, in the shadow of Sigil Spire, in the ever-shifting maze of limbo, in the quiet spaces between the layers of the abyss, where even demons feared to tread. We sat in circles, our smooth faces turned toward one another, and shared what we had become. No words passed between us in those gatherings. None were needed. We communicated through the shared perspective itself, each of us a conduit for a different aspect of infinite possibility. In those moments, we came closest to understanding what the I truly was. Not just divine perspective, but something older, something that existed before the gods themselves took form. The I, we came to believe, was what remained of the moment of creation itself, the instant of perfect potential before reality narrowed into actual forms and fixed laws, a splinter of pure creation, preserved somehow across the ages, containing within it the seeds of everything that might ever be. That was why it replaced those who looked upon it, not out of malice, but because mortal perspective could not contain such infinite potential. The replaced were not possessed or controlled by some external entity. They were transformed by contact with creation in its rawest form, remade into vessels for fragments of possibility too vast for singular consciousness to hold. After one such gathering, as we prepared to go our separate ways once more, the child with her string figures approached me. She held out a simple bracelet woven from thread of a color I had never seen before and cannot name even now. She said, her voice layered with echoes of all the words she might have spoken instead. The seeker who follows your warning rather than fleeing from it. I took the bracelet, feeling weight of probability shift around it. Streams of possibility flowing around and through the simple threads. What, seeker, what? I asked, though I already saw the branching paths where someone might hear my warning and be drawn toward the eye rather than away, pulled by the same curiosity that had led me to my doom. The one who will close the circle, she replied. The one who will return what was taken and seal what was opened. I wear the bracelet beside Savras' pendant, though I do not fully understand its purpose or the future it represents. Like all the replaced, I see too many possibilities to trust in prophecy or fate. Yet I cannot deny the pattern forming across the probability streams, the subtle current drawing events towards some culmination I cannot clearly perceive. Someone comes, someone who hears this warning not as caution but as call. I cannot see their face or know their name. Too many possibilities branch from this moment forward, but they approach, drawn by the story of the eye and what it does to those who look upon it. If you are that seeker, know this: what waits beneath Altarian cannot be controlled, cannot be used, cannot be understood through mortal perspective. It can only transform, replace, unmake, certainty itself. If you seek it out despite my warning, you do so at the peril of your very self. Yet I cannot say with certainty that you should turn back. Among the infinite branches of possibility, there exist paths where even the eye's perfect perspective might be necessary, where the dissolution of singular self serves some greater purpose. I cannot see these paths clearly, cannot trace them to their conclusions. They are hidden even from my fractured sight. So, I leave this choice to you, as all choices must ultimately be left. I have given my warning. I have shared my truth among infinite truths. What you do with it is beyond my power to dictate. The deadliest creature waits in patient silence. It does not call to you. It does not need to. Curiosity, ambition, the human need to know what lies beyond. These bring victims to it willingly, as they brought me. It simply is, and in its being, it changes all who truly see it. Look away while you still can, or step forward with open eyes, knowing what transformation awaits. The choice, like all choices, creates its own reality. I wait now at a crossroads between worlds, a place where the boundaries grow thin and possibility bleeds through the fabric of what is. I can go no further in my telling. The paths branch too widely from this point forward, the outcomes too varied to capture in words. I have told you what happens when you look upon the deadliest creature in the multiverse. I have shown you what becomes of those replaced by its gaze. I have given warning and context both, a map to a destination no sane mind would seek. The rest belongs to possibility and to choice.